Hello, I'm Bob Bradley. This is THE 101, Introduction to Theater and Drama Arts. I am most happy today to have as a special guest Michael Brill, who is currently living in Los Angeles. Michael has worked in many different facets of musical theater. He has been an arranger, a musical director, a musical coach, a musical conductor, and a composer. And all of these things tie into, in one way or the other, what musical theater is, and we're going to talk about what the functions are, what various functions these different particular tasks will cover. I think you will find it to be a most interesting hour. Okay, I think most of us know what a composer is, but why don't we go back and we talk about what do you do with each of these, what functions do you serve, what do you do with being a conductor, director, arranger? So go on. Okay.
Well, first of all, I should start by saying that on some shows you do end up doing all of those things in the same show, but let's take them one at a time. The conductor is the person who, in the performances of the show, keeps the orchestra and the singers together and lets them know and sets tempos and basically keeps things together through the run of the show, but it's only involved in production, in the actual performances. The conductor has to rehearse with the orchestra and the singers so that they're all together, but the conductor, if you narrow it to that specific function, doesn't have anything to do with the rehearsal period, with putting the actual show together, unless the conductor is also the musical director. The musical director, generally when we use that term, we mean the person who teaches the singers the music. That's also sometimes called vocal director. Actually, it's interesting because when you talk about the different tasks, some people view the tasks differently. In a situation like tent, let's talk about that first of all, tent theater, the musical director often is the conductor, is the vocal director, does all three. But I'm learning, like in Broadway and national tours and things like that, there is a person called a music supervisor who actually sets all the music. He teaches the people the vocals. He works on the arrangements, kind of supervises the arrangements for dance music and also for vocal music. And then he leaves the show once it starts, and then he gives it over to someone which they call the musical director, which I would call the conductor. It's the person who goes on the road and actually takes care, and their title is musical director, and their assistants are called associate musical director or music director. And they go on the road with them, but that's only at that level when you can afford to hire all those people. I think generally speaking, producers prefer to have the same people do all. So, so conductor specifically is the one who keeps the orchestra and the singers together by hand motions and facial expressions and various signals, keeps things going through the show, keeps everyone together. The musical director or vocal director is the one who teaches the singers their music. The conductor, which they sometimes call a musical director, also rehearses the orchestra and gets them ready. That's the only rehearsal they actually do. If you call someone a conductor only, they do the rehearsal of the orchestra and get them ready and then conduct the orchestra. That's pretty confusing, isn't it? The titles overlap. Are there any of those unclear?
No, I think we're clear. But okay, let's use a specific example. Okay. You, when the national tour of Annie Get Your Gun was in L.A., it then left L.A. and went on hiatus, and then started doing what, a week to week?
Weeks. There were, I think there was a 2-week stay, but mostly it was weeks. There was one split week, but for about 2 months it was mostly full weeks.
Okay, you were working then the national tour after it left L.A.
Right.
Specifically, what were you doing on it?
I was associate musical director was my title. What I basically was, I was assistant to the conductor. If something happened to the conductor, it was my job to come in and conduct the show. But my day-to-day duties were to play in the orchestra, play the first keyboard. In the situation of most of these kinds of national tours, they travel with a conductor and a keyboard player and a drummer. And this is a musicians' union arrangement, and they pick up all the rest of the musicians in every town they go to. But because you have the conductor and the drummer and the keyboard the same, the basic core of it is there, and everyone else can kind of follow along, generally speaking, if they're reasonably good musicians. So day to day, what I for sure was doing every day was playing the keyboard and the synthesizer in the orchestra, as piano and as various other instruments. But I also had the responsibility to take over if something happened to the conductor. Now, I also rehearsed the singers, like when new people were coming into the show during the day when we weren't performing. We had lots of people come in and they had to learn the dance, and I would play rehearsals for that. The conductor, which they call the musical director in that situation, would teach them the music, but I would play piano for the dance rehearsals while the new people were learning the dance. But that was essentially what I did.
Now, when you're working in LA and doing various things, how many of those functions do you do, or does it depend? All of them. All right.
For instance, there's a cabaret performer from New York who comes and does his shows in Los Angeles, and I'm his piano player when he's in Los Angeles. So in that case, I perform, and I even sing a little bit, but mostly play piano for his performances. When he comes to Los Angeles, I rehearse with him. There's a professional theater in the south section of Los Angeles, Palos Verdes area, which has an education program associated with it, and I work a lot with that. Which, for instance, right now we're doing The Wizard of Oz with 7 to 14-year-olds, an entire 50 of them, and I'm playing rehearsal piano for that. The next thing that's happening at that school is they're doing a production of Footloose, which is 13 to 22-year-olds, and I'm being the vocal director for that production. That we start rehearsals for that as soon as I get back in about a week, and we've already had auditions. And those are the kinds of functions I do there. I also have done a lot of vocal coaching. Which is different from teaching voice. Vocal coaching is just when a singer wants to bring a song to you to rehearse, to get ready for an audition, to prepare an audition piece. They want just some accompaniment so that they can practice it, but they also want some guidance on phrasing and breathing and interpretation and how to place things vocally, and not really highly technical vocal things, but things about performance that they try to brush up their auditions. So that's vocal coaching. That's another thing I do in Los Angeles. I've arranged some songs for cabaret singers, some other cabaret singers that I was not actually able to play for because I went on the road with Annie Get Your Gun. But a woman I started working with for cabaret, for instance, I had to make charts for her. She had some songs, and I needed to arrange them for her. So that's where the arranging comes in.
Okay, when you say arranging and make charts, maybe you need to explain.
Okay.
What's that?
Well, generally speaking, what it involves someone has a song they like, they want to sing. Either they have sheet music to it, or they don't have sheet music to it. If they don't have sheet music to it, then somebody like me will get it off the tape. That's what we call getting it off the tape. Or the CD, we'll listen to it and transcribe it we'll make music out of it, make printed music out of something that we hear. That happens a lot. If they already have the music, sometimes they'll want it in a different key, but almost always they'll have a specific way of playing it that they like. We'll rehearse a lot, and we'll find the style that they like, which is, generally speaking, rarely going to be exactly what's on the printed page if they have some printed music. We work on a different way of doing it, like maybe some different chord changes, maybe some different feels. And when we have that all decided, then I put it on the page. I have the computer notation software now, which I've spent the last couple of years really learning pretty well. And so I make them a piece of sheet music that has vocal and a piano part on it, so that any piano player can pick it up and play exactly what I would play.
So at this point, the particular singer has the music now and could give it to any competent, shall we say, competent piano player, and expect that it would sound somewhat like that.
It would sound almost exactly what I played, and that's the job of the arranger when they do things like that. For instance, when I went on Annie Get Your Gun, I left her with like maybe 6 or 7 charts that I had written out that she didn't have anything written out before for them. So if I hadn't done that, she would have had to start all over with a new piano player. But now that she had those, she could just hand them to her new piano player and just start doing her act. It saves a lot of time for her, and she gets what she wants.
All right, when you say she, are you talking about the person playing Annie, or?
Oh, I was referring to the woman who does cabaret in Los Angeles, that I was doing her charts. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Do you, because you talked about, I know, various singers coming in and playing the role of Annie, first one and then the other. Do you make changes in the songs when one singer leaves and one lead singer leaves who's been playing Annie Get Your Gun, and somebody else comes in?
As a matter of fact, you do. We knew all along in this last 2 months that I was doing that we were going to have 2 sets of each. We had a separate key for each Annie. We had a separate key for each Frank. So we just carried them in our books. That's one change. because the music's all live, thank goodness, still at that level. A lot of places are using taped music and sequence music, but in that case, because it's live, if the new Annie or the new Frank wants to take a section a little more expressively, a little slower, we'll do that for them. The conductor just basically alerts us that we're going to do that. But basically, if we follow him, we're fine anyway. If you're following the conductor, it's fine. But besides tempo and key, there's not much else you change because it throws off. You can't change too much or it starts throwing off the technical people or the other cast. But in ad-lib sections of ballads, in rubato sections, in free sections of ballads, for instance, like the beginning of this version of Annie Get Your Gun is just a real quiet solo with Frank singing There's No Business, like just really slowly. And Tom Wopat liked it really, really slowly and expressive because he was really doing something with it, whereas Rex Smith preferred to just kind of fly through it because he didn't feel like giving it that much weight. That wasn't the important part for him, but that was only a few instruments. So that changed, but it was only a matter of following the conductor, besides, unless the key is different.
So those changes were worked out between the musical director and the star, and then it filtered down to everybody else.
I think those changes are almost exclusively worked out between the music supervisor in New York and the stars, and it's handed down even to the person who's conducting on the road, who's called the musical director, because he's in charge. They kind of divide the artistic and production side, and he's considered production side. He has some input, but for instance, John McDaniel was the supervisor of this, and any changes or anything that was worked out as far as keys or any of that came from him directly. Oh, okay. And they were constantly in contact with him on the road, but it was his choice, whatever happened, and he kind of had to approve everything.
All right, let's back up. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Okay. And that is, at this point, somebody has hired you. Let's see, what shall we have them hire you for? Well, let's have you just do everything. You're going to rehearse the musical. You're going to play the piano, and then you will become the conductor. Okay. All right. So at this point, they hire you to do this. Okay. Where do you begin working? When you get this, what's the first thing you do? And this is something you have never seen, and something you don't know.
There have been a lot of situations like that. That's a good example. That happens a lot in Los Angeles. For instance, like for new musicals, if someone's putting on a new musical, they'll call asking for all those things in once. And so the first thing that happens is first they call you up and they say, you've been recommended to me by someone, and are you interested? Are you available? And you discuss, and you have, for several days, you'll have a discussion and a regular negotiation. You'll decide whether or not you're going to do it. Okay, assuming you agree on a price and the dates are fine, then the first thing that happens is they give you the score and any kind of audio materials they have. They may give you a tape, they may give you a CD, or they may have nothing at all, and they may just give you a score. And you'll start having production meetings. You'll have meetings with the director of the show, and with usually that involves all the rest of the technical staff, the scenic designer, and all that. The producer will usually be involved. Sometimes it will be cast, sometimes it won't. It depends on if they're calling you as an emergency. Let's assume for your hypothetical that it's brand new and nothing's ever been done on it before. It's not been cast. So the first thing I would do, I would look at the score, I would study the score, I would talk to the director about the score, I would talk to the composer about the score, I would talk to the producer about the score. We would decide, I would learn from them how they saw certain things.
Okay, now do they give you the book also?
Oh,
book
yeah,
meaning,
absolutely.
Okay, so you have the dialogue. Yeah. Okay, so that you know where these things belong.
Yeah,
okay.
I shouldn't have left that out. You view it as a whole, and you take the piece as a whole, and you talk about it and make sure that you feel the same, that you're understanding, that you're interpreting the piece the same way they are. It sounds strange, but what's on the page will appear different to people, and what you see for different characters, and maybe issues you have, like this may be hard to find a singer of this style who can sing this range, or I may be confused about how do you see this character vocally because it isn't clear from the score of the book, and I'll ask questions like that. And then, so I guess the next thing that would happen would be you'd have auditions. You'd set up the auditions, and you'd hire the pianist. Do you want to go into the technical side of this or the artistic side? Because there'll be things like lots of phone calls to find rehearsal pianists to find that they're available. Once you get a rehearsal pianist, A lot of times you may not find one, and you may have to, like I may have to play the auditions myself. That happens a lot, even at higher levels.
Oh, so you're going to play the piano, but also at the same time, and listen to the singers.
Yeah.
Okay.
That happens a lot, depending on how much money they have and how many people they can hire. You may end up doing that. In an ideal situation, unfortunately, most of the stuff I've done out there has been that way. There will be a rehearsal pianist, and so you can sit at the table and listen. You sit with the director, and you judge. You listen to all these people, and you decide who might possibly work for the show, and you decide who definitely won't, and you call back the people that for a later audition for the people you think might be good for the show. You sing them maybe some stuff from the score. You have them sing you teach them a little bit of the score to see how they fit with that specific musical style. And yet, of course, there's constant negotiation between the director, the musical director, the producers. The producer has, that was an interesting difference between the professional world and the educational world. The producer has such a strong voice in even the artistic element in most of the stuff that I've done, and I don't know if that's normal for theater, but it's kind of interesting because
in what way does the
producer may have reasons why they want a certain person to be in a role, or they may have a certain vision of a character, or they may have a certain vision of a relationship that disagrees with the director or the musical director or both, and the producer is kind of the boss, and so there are a lot of negotiations there that are constantly surprise me. It's very interesting. I hear stories about that happening in New York and Broadway all the time too. I know that a producer will want someone, and the person they've hired to direct won't. And sometimes the result will be a director is fired, or a director just chooses to leave because they don't get to work with who they want to work with, and they can't make the show work with who the producer sees doing the roles.
The producer is the one who has that ultimate, well, since the producer is usually the one who's holding the purse strings.
Exactly.
The producer is going to have sort of that final power.
If you get really conscientious producers, they will step back, relax, and trust the creative people that they've hired. And I have been very fortunate to work with some of those also. That's the one I'm working with at Palos Verdes is like that. She's wonderful.
But also, of course, frequently the producer can be looking and thinking in terms of box office. Absolutely. And that is this particular person has a certain name, has a certain following, is somebody that we can be sold.
They can be marketed. Yeah. That is one of the big considerations. Another big consideration is a lot of times these producers know their audience so well that they can tell you they're not going to like this kind of actor even if it's not a name, or they will like this kind even if they're not a name. Just their tastes. They know their tastes so well, and they say, oh, they like him a lot better than they would like him, or they like her a lot better than they would like her.
Okay, we've got let's go. We've cast it.
Okay, so
it's cast. All right, now what do you do?
Cast that everyone agrees on, so we start rehearsing. Usually, it seems what happens is they go in the order of the show, and they just, they'll teach a musical number, they'll put it on its feet. Usually start with the opening, unless there's some reason not to. And you just kind of go through the show like that, because the choreographer can't really do anything until they know the music. So we teach a song, they learn the dance, and a lot of times what will happen is while they're learning the dance, when I say they, that's probably the chorus, the ensemble, they will be learning a big dance number probably as an opening, and maybe I, as the musical director, would take the leads aside to teach them their music, their solos, and anybody who's not being used for that, I will use, and if I were fortunate enough to have a rehearsal pianist, we might have 3 different things going on. The dance people might be working on something, the rehearsal pianist might be working on one set of vocals, and I might be working on another set of vocals, but basically you just use all the time you have as quickly as possible, because the rehearsal periods are always too short, and you...
what is the usual, the professional, what's the standard?
You know, I don't think there's any, at this point, I don't even think there's any pattern.
Well, I know on Broadway, the Broadway musical will have 4 weeks. That is, they will have 4 weeks of rehearsal at rehearsal pay. And once they've passed the 4 weeks, they can continue rehearsing, but at that point, everybody moves to performance pay, whether they're performing or not. Right.
4 weeks is a really leisurely time to do a big musical. It really is, because as a contrast, the summer stock in the Northeast will put a show together every week or every 2 weeks. In Los Angeles, the Reprise series, which is like the Encore series in New York, where they take supposedly obscure musicals and have maybe some big names do them, they do it like in 2 weeks. But I mean, I know that the standard Equity, like New York thing, is probably 4 weeks, but that doesn't happen much. The main contract that Equity has with the actors, Equity is the actors union, has with the producers in the West Coast is called a Civic Light Opera contract, which enables a theater to hire either maybe 2 or 4 or maybe 8 equity people and have the rest of them be non-equity, so they can be local people from the area. So that saves them a huge amount of money, but there are still some equity jobs, there's still some union jobs. Then there are theaters like the famous ones like La Jolla and the Globe in San Diego and like Pasadena Playhouse, which I think are full equity. And I actually don't know what their rehearsal periods are, but I don't know. They may be 4 full weeks, but I don't know exactly.
Okay. Now, when you're working with the people you're working with, and these are, and let's assume at this point that these are the professional, equity professional people, what do you expect them to know when they come to work with you? What, or do you expect anything from them?
Well, you know, that's up to the artistic team, because some artistic teams, like a musical director and director, will say to the cast, will give them their music ahead of time, maybe even give them a tape, so that they can learn it, but definitely they give them the book. But a lot of directors I know will ask the equity companies to come in off book, come in knowing all of their music and knowing all of their lines. Now, some of them don't do that. In Los Angeles, which is not such a hardcore theater town as New York, almost everyone who does theater in Los Angeles is doing something else. They're there to do television or film. So I don't think they ask that as much of people there. But in New York, I've been in a lot of situations in New York where they did that, where they asked to be coming off book.
Okay, let's say they come in at that point, they've read the book at least, but they don't know the music, so where do you start?
No, they should know the music.
Oh, they should know the music.
What will happen is the moment you're hired, you will that you are sent as an actor. The moment you're hired, you are sent not only the script, but you're sent the music, okay. and you may be sent a tape, but you could be reasonably expected to take just the music and go to a vocal coach and learn it.
Oh, so you are expecting that they will have already done some kind of learning work prior to this?
In some situations. Now, that depends on, but it's really up to the discretion of the musical director and the director. In some situations, you don't want that. If you're doing something and you're going to do something new with it, you want to have them physically in rehearsal so you can shape what's going to happen. But I find, and I think most musical directors would agree, it's really hard to know the moment you've cast before you've ever started rehearsing exactly how you want the music, and I think it's really hard to unlearn things and change things. I mean, personally, I don't think I would ever do that. For ensemble, I might give them parts before we start a rehearsal, but for leads, if they had not done the role before, I think I'd want to teach it to them in person. I don't know if I'd want to just trust it to the music or even a tape.
Okay, now, you say teach it to them. What do you mean by teach, and how do you teach it?
How you teach it, and there are two different ways to teach, and one applies to people that read music and one applies to the people that don't. For people that read music, basically you just play along with them and let them practice it because they read it from the page, and you kind of shape it, and you say, let's do this with this phrase, let's speed this up here, let's play around with this rhythm a little bit because it feels unnatural on you particularly, we'll say that to the actor. That part of teaching is easy, and teaching is not even a good way to describe that, even though it should be called, that's what the process is. But the more common process is people that don't read music, interestingly enough, in this business, and you actually end up playing it for them and kind of learning it by rote. A lot of people can tell a little bit of the up and down of the notes. They get a little bit of visual help by looking at the page, but mostly they just learn it by hearing it. And if they have really good ears, they'll pick it up quickly. And if they don't have really good ears, if their ears are not really tuned into hearing nuance and rhythm and pitch, then you just do little sections. You play and sing it for them, and then they need to sing it back. And you do little sections at a time, and you start building onto that. But basically, it's teaching by playing and singing, showing them what it is, and having them do it back, and then adjusting it.
Okay, they've learned the notes. Okay. All right. Now, you said by shaping it by phrases. How do you make that decision?
It's a 100% judgment call. I mean, you're going to be bound by some technical things like a kind of a tone placement or that is healthy for the voice. But honestly, there are very few actual limitations on how that decision is made. It's besides judgment. I'll give you the absolute parameters. Like, you don't want to do things that are going to hurt a voice. Technically, you don't want to work on diction or phrasing in such a way that you can't understand the lyrics, that the audience can't understand the lyrics. But short of that, it's basically taste, and a lot of that is dictated. In the case of a musical director, is dictated by their experience, their particular preferences, what they like to hear. I mean, You want something that's going to help the drama. I can talk in generalities like that, but as far as specifics, you know, it's different for every situation. It really involves who the actor is, what the role is, and exactly what you're trying to accomplish, because every single actor is different, and every single role is different, and every single role is different on any actor that plays it. And so you look at your specific situation and you decide what's going to sound the best.
I suppose it depends to some extent on the experience of the individual, how much input, I hate that word, how much say-so does the individual singer, performer then exchange with you?
That's fascinating, because that is a negotiation. That's a constant negotiation. There are certain singers who will want to have 100% say. There are certain singers that want to have 0%, that want to be told exactly what to do, and there's everything in between. And a lot of times, and that's, of course, that's the cause of a lot of friction in, between musical directors and singers. If a musical director, which I tend to be, for better or worse, a little headstrong and opinionated about the way they want things to be, singers will be the same way, and they have, and I think there needs to be a balance, and so you're constantly working on that balance. In later years, I've learned to appreciate the actor's input more than my own. I've become a little less hard-headed about that. But you know, in some ways, I feel like the actor should have all the input because the actor's the one doing it. But there has to be a critical eye. There has to be an objective person from the outside looking at it from a musical point of view, and not just a dramatic point of view, which you assume the director will be doing. But the answer is, it's a constant negotiation. It's you're always trying to figure out who is going to have more say, and if you disagree, who is going to prevail. But fortunately, I would say more than half the time you agree. You agree on what's the best.
Okay, now maybe we need to get to, when you're negotiating this, whatever it is, or agreeing with, what is it? Why are these differences there, or why are these opinions the same? What kind of decisions are you? What's leading you to make these decisions? How?
You mean what the difference in motivations of the two, you mean? Or?
Right, okay, you use the word motivations. Okay, where do motivations come from when you're singing?
Well, interestingly, okay, I'm going to give you some specific examples. That's the best way I can think of to talk about that. Suppose a singer really likes the way a particular high note sounds in their voice. They really get a tremendous personal pleasure out of it themselves. A lot of singers, unfortunately, it's hard for them to let go of that and listen to the musical director or the director saying, you know, you're holding that note a little too long, or it's a little too loud, it takes us out of our theatrical moment, or it causes a lack of flow in the music or in the musical. And that's an example of a place they might disagree. If you have really, really good-hearted actors who are trying to help the whole production, that never comes into play. That only comes into play if an actor is particularly more interested in themselves.
Yeah, putting him or herself first before the character and before whatever the musical is.
Exactly, but on the other side, I think it's also possible for a musical director to do the same thing. A musical director can say, you know what, I feel like when you hold that note a long time, it takes you out of character, and the director may decide, and along with the audience, that this character would hold it out. So that's just a judgment call. It's a disagreement. So the musical director can be wrong too, and it's all a guess until you get in front of an audience, and even then, it's kind of subjective, the whole thing.
Okay, but I think what you're saying here is that what we're looking at and trying to do is to find in what way is this song rooted in this particular musical, and
character and plot, and what is its function? How does it advance the story? How does it illuminate character? You know, how does it develop relationships? How does it best serve the whole piece?
Okay. I think we've just partially answered, but let's talk about how does song function in a musical? What do songs do in a musical? Why do characters begin singing at some point?
Now there's two different, when you say that, of course, I hear two different questions. I hear, what do they do in the way musicals are done now, and what ought they do?
All right, let's cover both. That's okay.
What I think they probably are designed to do is what we were just talking about, which is to further the plot, to reveal character, to to express something, the old classic view of it is when a scene gets really building and something's happening between two people or within one person or within a group of people that becomes so emotional and so heightened that you can talk and talk and talk, but words are no longer enough to express the importance of it or the passion of it, then you must break into song because that's the only way to express it. That's what it should be, in my opinion, and that's kind of the classic view of it. And what happens a lot of times, and this started way back in the early days of the musicals, when that depends on whether you view musical theater as an art or I don't want to say an art or an entertainment, but that's kind of what I mean. Whether you view it as a diversion to just make you smile and laugh and take you away from your life, or whether you view it as theater to actually take you on a journey and change something about you. And if you view it as the latter, well, of course, you need to have songs that are only there to advance the plot or to eliminate character. But a lot of people like their musical theater to be a diversion, to like it to be an entertainment, to like it to be just, we're going to have some fun, we're going to watch some people do some funny things, we're going to watch them dance, we're going to sing, we're going to forget about our cares for a little while, and we're just going to enjoy, we're just going to have some pleasure. And for the people that like that kind of musical, and for people that write and produce that kind of musical, song sometimes is just entertainment. It's just a clever melody that sticks in your head. It's something that's fun to dance to. It's a lyric that makes you laugh. May not have anything to do with the plot, but there's both of those kinds of those songs serve both of those functions and everything in between.
Well, of course, from some extent, the dividing line, or at least frequently the dividing line, begins to be that the earlier musicals on up through the 20s and 30s were there. Mostly the storyline was a kind of clothesline, and you hung the songs on the clothesline, and it was there to do exactly as you say. Then by the time we get into the development of where there are strong storylines, and we began finding this, especially in some of the Gershwin, some of the Rodgers and Hart in the 1930s, and then of course the date that most people, or the landmark that most people use, is the 1943 production of Oklahoma. But we well know that long before Oklahoma, this was already being done. But there was a much stronger intent to develop a story, to develop a drama, to develop characters, and now everything in the musical, the music and the song, all of those things were there in some way to move that story along, to develop that character in some way or the other.
It's a great idea, and it's been done really successfully in a lot of instances. But in recent years, it's become a real challenge to do that because of the dance element. Because the traditional musical theater, the musical comedy or the musical, was in concept was supposed to be dance theater and dance drama and music all used together to tell a story. There are so few stories where dance is organic to the story, so few. And when it is, it works amazingly well. But if it's not, then and you still try to have dance in it, you end up with some things that don't necessarily relate to plot and character. Or if you, but on the other hand, if you focus it around the dance, then you, well.
Right, and then of course, certainly since the 1970s, we have done a lot of experimentation in breaking away from that, what is called the strong book musical, or the story-centered musical. And of course, Sondheim has done all kinds of experiments in moving away from that in some way or the other, as long as many others have in addition to that. So that especially when we get to musicals by the end of the century and into the new century, we began to find all kinds of differences than here. But in the classical musical, yes, that is what is going to happen. Where you've been working, I know, on some new musicals, where do you find that the writers have been taking these new musicals? What have they been doing? Have they been continuing in the book vein, or what kinds of things?
Experimenting is the key word. That's really what I'm seeing. Experimentation, exploration. Ever since, you know, after a chorus line after the years when there were many big hit musicals every year, when there started being only a few, I think it's kind of looking for a direction. And I actually feel that we're going back more to book musicals now. I just saw The Full Monty, which is almost your classic book musical, and it has this new modern style of music. There are, at the same time, there's Mamma Mia, which is just basically a review, from what I hear.
Well, Mamma Mia is a clothesline musical.
It's a clothesline musical,
I mean, it is a 1920s clothesline musical in which, of course, all the songs existed previously because it's ABBA from the 70s and 80s. Yeah. So they took the songs that were already written, and then they went in and they found, okay, let's see, what can we do to put this, how can we put this song in here? It's a clothesline musical.
It is, yeah, that's completely right.
But it's great fun. I mean, it is absolutely marvelous fun.
I've heard people just had a great time at it. So I feel like that it's kind of going in all directions at the same time. I feel more of a gravitation toward back to drama and having it be a play where you have a story and you have characters and the drama and the dance and the music all help. I feel a movement toward that, but there's experimentation going on in all directions. I feel. I don't think it's there's anything really clear.
Okay, let's sort of jump ship for a moment, or that is, we aren't jumping ship, but let's talk about, you have also composed musicals. You have composed.
Half of one and a whole other.
Okay, and one has been performed.
We did a reading of it in New York. Yeah. It was a small romantic comedy, and then we did a reading of it. We didn't go any farther than that. It was we just never finished it. It was a romantic story. There was really nothing unique about the plot line. The only other thing I finished is I did like a kind of a hybrid of a review and a musical, which was based on my years in New York with Connie Paschal, when we did our cabaret act in there. But I've just finished working on that, and I'm not really going to do anything more with it for quite a while. Once I finished it, and I did my first complete piano vocal score, which took a year to get it in the finale. It's like 200 pages of music. Finale, the music notation software. I was able to actually look at it, have my first experience of composing and writing it down, because in all the cabaret stuff I did, I never wrote down. I was able to make a good tape of it and look honestly at it, and it was autobiographical. It was about me. I don't think it had any relevance beyond me. It was something I needed to do. It was about my coming of age in New York, and it was very cathartic for me, but that's about the end of it. So it was for learning for me, and I'm on to new things now. But actually, what I'm working on right now is very exciting. I'm talking to the producers of Big Eden. I don't know if you know that movie, but it's a film. It's a small independent film, and I'm trying to make a musical out of. Actually, I've gotten the ear of the director and the producer, and the director is like my CD. He was very interested in it, so I'm talking to the producer now about getting the rights. But it's a great story, and I would love to do that. So right now, I've kind of thrown away the autobiographical stuff, put it aside at least, and I'm diving into a story that's not about me, because I'm very excited to write characters that are not me and my friends, because I'm going to write a lot better for them, I know.
Yeah, have you seen the musical Tick Tick Boom Boom? No. Which is the Jonathan Larson that he had started on and wrote before he did Rent.
I probably heard about that musical, but I didn't realize that they were doing something with it now.
Well, it was done in New York, and actually somebody came in and sort of redid the book, but it's certainly autobiographical, and it's about Jonathan Larson and a number of his, well, one right at the point he was turning 30, and he had not accomplished anything that he wanted to accomplish, which was to write the big musical. And so this tied to that very much. But let's go back just a moment.
Sometimes it works, and for some people it works. Some people, I think, are able to pull away and look at their own lives in such a way and choose things about their lives that are interesting enough to have resonance for other people. In my case, I think it was just about me.
Well, of course, what happened with Larson was, of course, and that is that, for those who don't know, but is that at the, the technical rehearsal of Rent, he went home, had an aneurysm, and died, and of course Rent became an enormous hit. But what's interesting here is that what he had started on, which was about 5 years earlier, actually somebody else, they didn't do any new music, but somebody else went in and refashioned the storyline, refashioned the book, and put all of this together. So that, maybe that's the objectivity.
Yeah, exactly. The fresh eyes, that can make a complete difference but
All right, but where did you begin with this idea? When did you get the idea?
you mean, you're talking about the musical that I finished?
Yes, the musical you finished. Where did you start?
It started because Connie and I had done cabaret acts for many years in New York, and when I left New York, it was a very, very emotional experience for me. It was very, I kind of didn't want to leave. My entire self-image as an artist was based on the fact that I was living in New York, aspiring, and once I'm basically a country boy, and after about 5 years, New York, yeah, I am, yeah, and in New York, despite my great denials about it for a couple of years, just really started getting to me after 5 or 6 years. I just the noise, the constant crowds, the lack of anything green, many aspects of it, and the pressure of aspiring. Without going into my whole musical, when you do what I do, you have a duality of paths. You have a career and a job. Because to write, there's very little you can do to write that pays any money until way, 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 way down the line. And so you're doing something else to make money all the time. But the people that you're working for to make the money, they want your full attention. They want which as they should. It makes perfect sense in hindsight. But they want your complete devotion and your complete commitment. And it's really hard to commit to both at the same time, because it's very expensive to live in New York, very expensive. And so anyway, all those things became too much for me, and I needed to leave. I needed to leave, but I didn't want to, because I thought, who would I be if I weren't living there? I actually felt that if I weren't living there, I would be less of a person at that time. And that's been a hard thing to work through the years, but I believe I've worked through it.
All right. Did you develop your own book, or did someone else do it?
There was no book except for cabaret patter. Most of it took place in the cabaret, but it was through song. It was there was a little bit of dialogue, people singing back and forth, but otherwise it was just song. So it was a story with characters and relationships, but told either through songs or dialogue, people singing to each other. So it was all sung.
It's pretty much a sung through.
Yeah, it's about probably an hour 10, hour 15, the whole thing. It's basically one act.
But that's still 200 pages.
A lot of music, because it's all music, yeah.
All right. Once you began, how did you begin writing the music?
I know why I was going back to the New York cabaret days, is because when I left New York, Connie and I did a final farewell kind of a show, and I wrote a song for it called Little Town Eyes, which was about my years in New York. And it was a very emotional song for all of us that had been through that all together. There were many friends of ours that came to all of our shows and came to this last show. And I began to think about that song and Try Anyway, the other song that Connie used to always finish her show with, which actually a lot of other people do in cabarets in New York. It's kind of well known as far as a cabaret song. Those two songs, I looked at those two songs and I thought,
what's the song?
Try Anyway,
Try.
like I'll Try Anyway. Some people think of it as I'll Try Anyway. But I looked at those two songs and I said, these songs surely have a life beyond that moment in those cabarets in New York. And I had so many songs that we used in those cabarets that had no life outside of those cabarets. And so I decided I would tell that story. So I started thinking of plots. I started figuring out how those songs could be used, much in the way the Mamma Mia songs were used. In fact, that may be the problem with it.
Clothesline music.
Yes, it may have been what it was. So I created a fictional third character besides Connie and I, who was kind of an amalgamation of a lot of our friends, and had the three of them all arrive in the city at the same time and go on their various journeys through the city, and then conclude at that final cabaret night, so that Little Town Eyes song would be in its actual setting, in its organic setting from whence it came. So I saw what I had. I had a bunch of songs. I had maybe 10 to 12 songs that could be used in that format. I needed about eight or nine more, and so I set to writing those to fill in the gaps and to develop.
Now you're doing both lyrics and music.
Yeah, this is already done. The reason I keep talking about it in the past tense is because it's.
Yeah, right.
I finished the writing of it maybe a year or two ago.
Okay. But you did both music and lyrics.
Yeah. Okay. That's almost always what I do, except for one song that Connie and I wrote lyrics together. Basically, I took an idea of hers and wrote lyrics to it, and we're doing that. We're writing some more songs. We're collaborating on lyrics for some more songs. But aside from that, at this point, I do all my own music and lyrics.
Where do you begin, music or lyrics?
Almost always lyrics. Almost always lyrics. And I'm going to try to do that more and more. I'm going to try to start finishing the lyrics first, because I find the text is a lot better if the lyrics are done first, because you get distracted and start having fun with the singing and the melody, and you kind of lose track of what you're trying to say. If you make sure and say it, that it's in the words first, then the music becomes gravy and layers on top of that, as opposed to the words relying on the music, which can be a problem.
You have your lyrics, and now you're going to write your music. What's the relationship between the two?
You just basically sing the lyrics. You just play around. What I usually do is when I have lyrics done, I sit at the piano and I get like background music. I get the accompaniment. I work on the accompaniment usually before the melody. I get a feel, a style, some chord changes, and I work on things like that. And then I'll just start singing. I'll just start playing around, just experimenting with it, you know, like a little kid would, just singing on the words and see what sounds right and see what sounds wrong, and then gradually you start gravitating toward things that you like and things that add to the lyrics, and you start refining, and it's a really gradual process, but it's never the same twice. Sometimes I have started with a melody. Sometimes I've started with a melody and come up with words for it. And a lot of times what you'll do is you'll take a lyric, you'll set it to music, you'll get a completed melody, and then overhaul the lyrics completely. So in that case, you really, for the parts that you overhaul, that you throw out this verse and find new lyrics, for those sections, you're actually starting with the music. So it kind of goes back and forth. It's a funny process, but it's never the same twice. It really is never the same twice. It's mysterious. And I can tell you, if one doesn't embrace the mysteriousness of it, it's so frustrating, because you have no control over it. That's the point of it. That's why it's enjoyable, ultimately, is because you have no control over it. It's not in a conscious control. It's coming from somewhere else. It's coming from some part of you that you're not in conscious control of. And that is maddening if you want to get something done and it's not coming. But I wouldn't. I've made peace with that, because you don't want it to be predictable, and you want it to be mysterious. That makes it interesting.
Okay, so you're drawing from your well of creativity somewhere. Yeah. You're finding,
or you're channeling it from some great energy out there.
How do you get in touch with it, or do you? You just wait.
You know, the best way to explain it is to open your heart, is to open yourself up, because it's like I'm gonna start sounding religious and spiritual, but that is kind of what it is. You have to open yourself up to a greater, to an energy that's out there. It may be you, it may be something outside you. You don't know. You don't know what it is, but you have to kind of let go of you know, it's a good question. What is it that you're letting go of? You're letting go of your belief in limitations. You're tuning into something that's really deep and really core. That's the best way to say it. You're letting go of the extraneous, unimportant crap that you think about on a conscious level, and you're getting right to the core of the matter. What is the essence of it? Not and try to get away from trying to find specific words and trying to find specific notes. And what do I feel? What do I want to say? And the hardest part is getting in touch with how you feel. And once you do that, then you can start to express it. But it's a very mysterious spiritual thing. I know I can't explain it any better than that.
No. I mean, I think among other things, you're saying, one, you've said you open yourself up.
You have to.
And at that point, in many ways, you're very vulnerable.
And that's why it's so hard.
Right. And many people are very afraid of this moment.
You know who's most afraid of it are the people that do it. Because it's a terrifying thing. It's a terrifying thing when you expose yourself to how you really feel and what your real hurts are, what your real desires are. When you expose yourself to that, then you run the risk of disappointment. You run the risk of other people seeing the inside of you, that maybe not thinking that it's as pretty as it might be, or it's terrifying. And I've not met anybody who creates things from scratch who does not go through that. You have to get through that. That's the frustration. That's why a lot of people don't want to do it, because it's frightening. But even the people that do it, it's still frightening. But it's very rewarding if you can get through it. But you don't want to, and that's what I was trying to say. That's the resistance. That's where resistance comes into play, because the artist, and that's, I think, the clearest example of what people know that as is writer's block. It's when you feel like you're close, but you can't quite open up. You're holding on to your protection. You have to let go of your protection to be open, but that makes you vulnerable, which is letting go of your protection, which is scary. And so you fight with yourself, trying to get yourself to open up that way. And sometimes you succeed and sometimes you don't.
I think this, and this is as you well know, this is quite applicable to the actor and the singer.
Same process.
What they may be picking up the music and the text that somebody else wrote, but now they have got to find their own vulnerability to make that song live.
And they're always going to be coming from a different place, and this has been a great thing that I've had to learn over the years, is that they're not going to come from the same set of eyes and the same soul and heart that I come from. They're coming from a whole different being, a whole different prism. They're coming, and they have to make it personal to themselves before they can have a personal experience with it. And if they have a personal experience with it, it's the only way the audience can have a personal experience with it. But what's been hard for me is to let the actor have their own experience, and because I always wanted them to have my experience of it, and it doesn't work that way.
I think you've covered this, but from composing musicals, how did this help you become better than working within the standard musical framework?
Become better at?
Better at whatever the task was, conducting or coaching or...
help all that?
Right, yes.
I think because of the relationship between the writer and the audience, I started being aware of the difference between the communication that you give and the communication that someone else receives. And once I started being aware of what was getting across, what is still in my head, what is still in me, and what is actually getting across the airwaves to the audience, and that's what and then I have to be aware of the actors doing the same thing, and the actor I have to make sure that I'm getting it across to the actor. On all levels, it just makes you aware of the communication. I think that's the biggest thing it does. It helps, the biggest way it helps. Because you have to be able to communicate with the directors and with the actors on that level of allowing them to have their own reaction, but always being aware of a through line to the audience, and that your way may not be the best way. You have to be open to other ways. It's hard.
Well, we have had a most enjoyable conversation with Michael Brill, who has talked a great deal about working in various facets of the musical theater, from the music, put it that way, from the music standpoint, but then also about his own process and his opening up to and finding his own creativity. And that, of course, is one of the touchstones of this particular course, and that is to make people more aware of the creative process and what it takes. We're all creative, and we can all be creative in many ways, but I think, as Michael has just said, it is very difficult, and many people are very much afraid of taking that particular step. But when you are compelled to take it as an artist, that is the step you have to take, and eventually you will, or you'll end up being unhappy most of your life. So you just have to reckon with it and decide, what is it going to take? Been a most fascinating conversation, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. It was enjoyable and enlightening for me as well.